Welcome back, everyone. It is Jennifer Tarle, and today we have Geoff Anderson, who is the founder of Fluent American and the author of the Four-Step American Accent. And he's focusing on improving communication for all speakers of any language, especially in English. He is also the founder of Diverses, which is guiding poets and artists to creative and financial independence. And he is running Columbus, Ohio's first and only poetry dedicated venue, The Stanza. His essay collection, Meditations for the Independent Poet, is dedicated to the link between poetry, art, and business. Help me in welcoming Geoff. Hi, Geoff. How are you?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm good. How are you today?
I'm doing well. So, first of all, thank you. So, I want to give everyone some background. Geoff is the kindest. He reached out to me years ago and invited me to be on his YouTube channel. And so, that helped me get to some new people and reach some new audiences. So, thank
Yeah,
you for that.
thank you.
So, why don't you tell me a little bit about just what you do, and what are your businesses that you're into now? You're doing a lot of things.
There's a lot happening. Yeah. So I think it all starts with my experience in college. So I was an English literature major. I was an Italian major as well. I studied abroad in Perugia, which is where the Amanda Knox trial was going on. For
Oh,
people who know
okay.
that, yeah, that's a whole other thread. That was a couple years before I was there.
Okay.
But that just kind of gives the background that I'm interested in languages. One of the things that I encountered when I was in Italy, because I went there, I was probably around level. I tested into like level C1 for those who are familiar with the European framework for Italian. And honestly, it probably could have been higher, but my speaking was really low. So like my grammar was good, my reading was good, but they're like, Geoff, you just can't talk. So I just spent a year there just focusing on speaking.
Hmm.
And one of the things that was a pretty common refrain when people would talk to me is like, oh, like, you speak really well, but man, the accent, the accent, the accent. Like it was a common refrain. So I spent a lot of time focusing on pronunciation after that. And I think that's part of what led me later. I got my master's degree in teaching English as a second language. I was an IELTS examiner for speaking and writing test. And I was kind of asking myself, there's a lot of people teaching grammar. There's a lot of people teaching vocab and stuff like that. I don't want to go that route. It's already pretty saturated. One area that was less saturated was pronunciation, and just with my own kind of experience with Italian, I was like, maybe this is an avenue that is worth exploring more and guiding people towards. I don't want people to have the same experience that I had, right? So I started a pronunciation business. Eventually, just stopped working at language centers. I'd been a director and a teacher in different capacities, and then I was like, all right, it's time to do our own thing. And this was right around the time where the world ended, and so everyone's kind of going online anyway. So it was a good
Yeah.
time for that to occur. And then one of the things that was also happening in my life on the side was I'm very interested in poetry. I'm very interested in literature. I am very happy with my poetry and writing credentials. But one of the things I found was that in the pronunciation space, people didn't know I was into poetry. In the poetry space, people didn't know I was involved in communication in English, right? And so one of the things I've been really asking myself is how can I show up in more spaces the same way? How can I bring more of me everywhere that I go? And a lot of people will look at poetry and be like, well, you can't really make money on poetry. That's a very common refrain, especially among poets. And
Hmm.
so I don't personally believe that. I understand that that's the kind of the common knowledge is it's hard to live on the arts. There's the concept in English of like, the starving artist. And so part of that led me to launching Diverses, where it's all about trying to guide poets to, not only doing what they want creatively, but also financially, and that it doesn't actually have to sacrifice your art. And I know this is a very long answer. The last thing I'll say is that one way I'm trying to bridge this too is I recently started a new channel called Forward, where it is that blend. It's that concept of I write these haiku that are centered around aspects of communication. And so, they're haiku that I like. It's not like they're the focus is sacrificing the quality of the art. It's just directing it. right? So I'm able to teach aspects of communication for anyone, not just English language learners, because you teach communication too. You know, a lot of people speak in a way that makes them want to become invisible
Yes.
versus
Mhm.
actually standing out, right?
Yeah.
And so it's teaching communication devices through poetry, and long term, that's the direction that I would say a lot of my actions are probably going to move towards.
Okay. I have so many
Sorry, that was a
questions.
super long, and I'm so
No,
sorry.
I love it. We're definitely going to have to schedule another interview. So, um, I am so interested in your marriage of your English and your poetry business because I'm a big believer in sort of embracing your own voice. You don't have to communicate like I communicate. And there's some general rules that are helpful to follow, like you were saying with pronunciation. You have to be understood. I mean, I think that is first and foremost what needs to happen, but you need to find your own authentic voice. And I think authenticity rules in this day and age. I think it always has, but I think it's even more important. So,
Mm,
how do you use poetry to help people find their authentic voice? How do you do that?
okay, so first things first, where I think a lot of people get stuck with art is, and it's also in my mind what leads to a lot of people encountering things like writer's block, or getting stuck, not being able to create, or not sure what to do. I think a lot of people are holding themselves to a standard. There's the expectation that what I
Mm-hmm.
create is automatically off the shelf going to have to be something that performs well, even though we actually don't even know what performing well really means. You know,
Yeah.
we're not very clear on the metrics, right? And so we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves from a very early stage in the art. So instead, it's kind of like a relationship. Like I've been married to my wife for 11 years, you know,
Mm-hmm.
more than that. And I think when you're in a relationship, the first thing you have to assume, and you always have to assume, is that the other person is doing their best at all times.
Mm-hmm.
Because to not assume that, now you can go very into a deep dark place if you don't
Yeah.
assume that, right? So let's assume the best. Why not? You
Yeah.
know.
I love it.
And so for art, let's assume the art's already doing what the art needs to do.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like, quality isn't something that we necessarily control. You know, because some people wouldn't want to put the Mona Lisa in their living room.
Yeah.
Doesn't fit the aesthetic, doesn't fit the
Mm-hmm.
vibe, it's not the art style they want, you know? But it's the Mona Lisa. Some people would pay millions of dollars for it, and some people wouldn't even want to put it in their house. So this is the same thing with art. Once we understand that, let's not worry so much about the quality. Let's worry about what is the art doing for me.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so we have our own specific needs. For a lot of people, the art might just be that I'm going through a difficult patch in my life and I need to go through that self expression. The art may be like, hey, I have this really cool concept, visually, aesthetically, acoustically.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get it down. You know, whatever it serves. And I think that if we can use the art to serve our own purpose, then we're going to be able to approach it authentically. Because if you're doing it purely for someone else's things, well, now you're putting a lot of pressure on it. One of the things we see a lot in poetry is people writing about trending things and writing the popular stance on a trending event
Yeah.
instead of actually investigating it on our own. And
Okay.
so I think if we pursue art for what we personally, individually need, that's the way to approach it authentically.
I love that. It reminds me a little bit of improvisation. So I've studied improv,
Oh,
and it kind of
cool.
goes to that you're doing it not just to be funny. It's not for that. It's about sort of finding your own voice, assuming the best in yourself and in your communication partner, and then just kind of working through it together. And again, I also loved what you said. It's not about what's trending, it's about what you are kind of finding joy and interest in. How did you get into poetry? Because you didn't study that in college. Has this always been like a hobby? How did it become your job?
So in college, I was a double. So I was an English lit major and then Italian major as well.
Okay.
And I think I've been very fortunate that, when I was in elementary school, especially like the later grades, so around like sixth, seventh, eighth grade, I had m- my mom was supportive.
Hmm.
Uh, my teachers were supportive, but my eighth grade teacher, as a graduation gift, gave me a book of like, I forget the title, it was Immortal Poems or
Hmm.
something along that line. So I've had people that saw that in me and pushed me in that direction, which I'm very thankful for. I will say that it goes off and on. For instance, in high school, I went to an all boys school, and
Hmm.
there's not necessarily the poetry group there wasn't really active, I would say.
Hmm.
When I got to college, I specifically picked a liberal arts college, Kenyon College, for people who are familiar. It's in Ohio.
Hmm.
It's specifically known for its English program. And I remember my freshman year, I was just wandering the halls, and there were these two guys that were eating pizza and just sharing poems that they had written with each other. And
Hmm.
so it became like a weekly thing. This is back when Domino's had like the 555 deal. Shout out to
Yeah.
Domino's if they want to sponsor.
Hmm.
And then, and we would just order our $5 pizzas and share the poems that we had written and other poems that we had read recently. And that's something that we kept up, throughout that first year. And then it's just kind of continuing on from there. Eventually getting poems published, getting into creative writing programs, attending different fellowships,
Okay.
so on and so forth. Yeah.
So, what did you think you were going to do when you were studying English Lit and Italian in college? Like, what was your plan then?
I imagine that I was going to be a middle school teacher. I had done like some summer programs working with kids,
Uh huh.
and they were fun. I was an English teacher for
Hmm.
basically as a high schooler. I was teaching like sixth graders
Hmm.
English.
Okay.
It was through a program called Breakthrough, in case anyone wants to, if they're of the right age and they want to be a teacher or involved. It's a great program. They trying to help like underserved kids
Hmm.
over the summer. So I was planning on going that route. My then girlfriend, now wife, she did Teach for America where we were graduating from
Yeah.
college, and
Hmm.
so her assignment was San Antonio.
Okay.
So I was like, I guess I'll apply to grad schools in Texas.
Okay.
So
Hmm.
we moved down there, and it's kind of how I got involved with like language centers and things, because my program gave me a master's degree, but it didn't give me a teaching certificate.
Hmm.
So I wasn't legally able to work in public schools. So I had the degree. I got the degree in TESOL,
Hmm.
um, but I wasn't able to actually work in schools. So where could I work? Well, language centers. So
Yeah.
I started off at a language center, started teaching there. Uh, Eventually moved to Ohio because that's where my wife's family is located. They
Hmm.
had another branch of my language center there. They wanted me to be an academic director for a bit. It was supposed to be temporary. It was the
Hmm.
longest temporary assignment because it ended up being about 3 years. And then,
Yeah, that's how
yeah.
things work.
So, but that's kind of the thread, is that I was an English major expecting to teach middle school, not legally able to because of I didn't have the certificate. So I started
Hmm.
working at language centers, and then gradually got pushed more in the direction of ESL.
Okay, that's fascinating. So, I'm I'm a big believer in, I'm just going to bury the lead here, that
Yeah.
I think college is good, but I think sometimes we all go into college thinking then it's going to be this perfect thing where this is our plan and then this happens and
Mhm.
then this happens. And I love that you had this plan to do this one thing and now you've done all of these other things. So, okay, so you went from college, you were teaching in a language school, you're back in Ohio, you are now directing the language school. And then when did you get onto YouTube and how did you get onto YouTube? Because that's kind of a big jump. Was it like a side hustle or were you kind of tunneling out? Like, what was your plan? Or did you
Gotcha.
have one?
Yeah. So I was at the language center, and I don't know why, but I started teaching English on the side online.
Hmm.
There's a
Yeah.
platform called italki, which you're probably familiar with.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Hmm.
similar
Yeah.
platforms. So So I would teach in, be a director during the day, and then on weekends I started also being online. I think just to kind of start maybe building a base on the side, you
Yeah.
know. I don't know what exactly pushed me, or at least I don't remember what exactly pushed me to originally do that, but that's what ended up happening. Started teaching on the side, getting some students on the side, and eventually, again, so you work in ESL, but one of the things I can tell you the with the industry is that it's one of the first industries to get impacted by global events.
Mm-hmm.
If your oil prices drop, you lose your Middle Eastern markets and a lot of your South American
Yeah.
markets. If the dollar gets too high, you lose a lot of your Asian markets and other markets as well, right? And so even before everything changed, there was a time when the dollar was super strong and gas was super cheap. And so what you saw nationwide was a lot of language centers closing, and you
Mm-hmm.
also saw a lot of colleges create their own ESL departments
Mm-hmm.
instead of bringing on third parties to teach their students.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, colleges, we all know how they treat international students. They kind of just try to hit them for all their money.
Mm-hmm.
And the ESL movement is very much in a similar vein. You know, they charge
Yeah.
a lot. They try to funnel people into those programs. And so with those two factors, the economic and then just the direction that schools were taking, it impacted the language center I was at. It shut the language center down
Mm-hmm.
in the city we were in. And so thankfully, I was able to get a severance to hold me over for a little bit because they had
Mm-hmm.
to lay off, the whole team.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to just lean into the online teaching because I couldn't go to another language center because they're all closing.
Right.
There wasn't another one to go to. So I was like, I guess I got to go online or find a whole other career. I chose to go online.
Mm-hmm.
So I just went in on italki. And one of the things that I found was that I was teaching online on italki, and people were looking for more materials for after our class was finished. And so I kept pointing students to these other YouTube channels. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, here's this person that talks more about this topic. Here's another teacher that
Yeah.
talks more about this topic. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Like, these people signed up to have classes with me.
Yeah.
Why am I sending people that wanted me to other people that they may have even seen before and didn't want,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's what initially led me to go to YouTube, start making my own content. It's the first videos are still there. They're not very good.
Mm-hmm.
The ideas are good.
Yes.
The
Huh?
delivery needed some polish, but the ideas themselves were good. And it's just one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. I mean,
Yeah.
talking to YouTube is a whole other. We
That's a
could spend
whole
days
other
just talking
thing that
about
we can
YouTube.
keep talking about. I'm going to concur that my first videos are terrible. They're still on there.
It's
And I literally have no facial expression. You can barely hear me. It's
it's
so bad. But I do think that you have to start somewhere.
you
And I
too.
think
I hope everyone does YouTube. I hope everyone does.
I
It's
do
so good.
too. I think everyone has something to say. It gets back to your poetry thing. I really do think that everyone has something that they can give to the world, and
Yeah.
everyone should have a YouTube channel. And I also think YouTube they're more transparent with their paying once you get to a certain, client base and all of that, subscribers, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
think everyone should do it, and don't be afraid. And your hair doesn't have to be perfect, and all of those things. You know what
Just
I
put a
mean?
hat on. It's good.
People
Yeah.
worry about it, but you just can't. Okay, so now I'm curious. Then, when did you get to the point where you jumped? I'm going to say jumped back into poetry, even though you were kind of always doing poetry. But like, when did you start your poetry center, or
Mhm.
is it a school? Tell me a little bit more about
It's
that.
it's so I also have to be very honest right now. It's a my businesses has a very parasitic relationship. The the pronunciation is funding the poetry stuff because
Oh
right
yeah.
now
Hmm.
it's I believe it. Like at some point we have to take a risk, right? At some point
Yeah.
we have to go in a direction where we're like, hey, I'm sailing
Hmm.
to this island. I don't even know if there is an island, but I'm going
Hmm.
there. If you want to come along, I think it's going to be worth it. Because again, people have a lot of conceptions about poetry, and I want to change them, but I need more social proof. I already have it for myself. So, for instance, in my communication business, like, I'm actively incorporating poems or using poems in at least 30% of my classes,
Hmm.
directly as devices.
Love
And it's fun because some students actually start writing and start
it.
doing, like, it's a whole other thing.
Hmm.
But going back to my poetry path, so originally I was following the traditional path. In the poetry world, there's a path you often take. There's the traditional path, which is, you get your credentials. It's all credential building and social proof, right? So you need to get publications. You get a small book that's called a chapbook. After that, you get the full length book.
Hmm.
You get the MFA, so Masters of Fine Arts in Writing. You get the professor job, which is going to involve, moving schools every 3 or 4 years, trying
Hmm.
to get tenure, even though no one's offering tenure anymore. Like, that's the path, the traditional
Hmm.
path. And one of the things I found with it is it's very much putting your future in other people's hands.
Yeah. Hmm.
And one of the things that I started questioning was, do I still want to do that?
Yeah.
What happened? I had this chapbook manuscript I was sending out to journals, and one of the things that I think it didn't. I forget the name of the stages. There's stages before action. So
Hmm.
there's first, like, there's the discovery of the problem, but very often that's not the moment where you actually act. But I
Yeah.
think that this is the moment that kind of started instigating it, or pushing me to think about alternatives. I had this chapbook manuscript that I sent out to different competitions, because that's usually what in poetry you have to do. You have to send poems out to contests, and it was a finalist twice. So it's a
Hmm.
final. So that means, it's beating out 1,000 other manuscripts, and
Yeah.
it's arriving at the final 10
Hmm.
twice in the span of months. And it got rejected both times. So I can put it down at, it made the short list. Great, it was a finalist. Great. And I looked closer at who the judges were for both those contests. It was the same judge for both contests. So in the span of in the span of 4 or 5 months, the same judge saw my manuscript twice and rejected it twice.
Oh, that's like.
And I'm very thankful for it now, because it made me realize. So here's this manuscript that, again, it's at the top of the pile consistently. That, because one person didn't choose it, is not out in the world. So
Hmm.
I'm letting one person decide how far my art goes.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I don't like it.
Hmm.
If other people want to play by that system, I get it. That's cool. You
Yeah.
do you.
Yeah.
But I was like, how can I take control? And since that moment, I don't do traditional submissions anymore. I don't do contests. If people ask me for stuff, that's fine. But soliciting is very different than, being solicited. So I'm okay with people coming to ask for stuff, but I'm not going to send you things. I'm not going to pay you to read my work. I'm not going to wait for you to reject it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of gatekeeping that happens, and there's a system.
Yeah.
And so the poetry business very much is trying to teach people, if you want to put your art out there on your own terms, this is what it could look like.
I think that is such a gift to the world that you are helping people to figure that out, because I do think things are changing so much. And when I got out of college and grad school, it was very credential based. I had a very similar path to what you're saying. And I worked for hospitals and schools for
Oh,
a
wow.
long, long time, and have all the credentials and did all the things. And at a certain point, I had that same feeling that you did, which is just like, well, why am I doing it this way when there are all of these sort of other like avenues, and things
Yeah.
just kind of grew, and one thing kind of led to another thing. And I love that you said your failure equaled an opportunity. So what are some other opportunities that you've recognized and you've kind of like started doing something about? Because I feel like you're really good at like not ruminating on things. You kind of, something happens and you're like, okay, let's do something. So, like, what are some other things that you've kind of done out of necessity instead of failure, I'd
Yeah.
like to say?
Yeah. I mean, because there is no failure, right?
Right. Yeah. It's
It's
learning. I like to say
Yeah,
it's learning, not
yeah,
failure. Hmm.
yeah. That's when I take on a new communication student. That's one of the first things. Like, if they decide they want to work with me, then the very first class we have, I'm like, all right, like, we got to move, because you're 10,000 mistakes away from the accent you want. So
Yeah.
we got to try to get
Mm-hmm.
those out of the way as fast as possible, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a fundamental process. And we've already kind of mentioned some of the things, like the early videos on YouTube, like
Mm-hmm.
those, there, there's issues with them,
Yeah.
right? The palms you put out in the world, like not all of them are gonna hit.
Yeah.
The posts, the Seth Godin, he's a marketer. He mentions, he has a blog. He's written what, like 10,000 posts, and
Mm-hmm.
his stance is, half the blog posts are below average.
Yeah.
So it's just math. It's just volume.
Yeah.
It's just numbers.
It's a
But
numbers game.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, getting back to the poetry space, what are some of the things that you love to do with poetry, just like on a fun note? Like, what kind of lights your fire with the poetry? Is it hearing other people creating? Like, what is it that like drives you to kind of keep going in this space where it's, like you said, kind of difficult because people think there's this kind of traditional path?
Yeah. So there was a time I'm very fortunate to be where I am because the city. So I'm in Columbus right now, and there was a time when every night of the week there was a poetry open mic that you go to in a show. That's
That's amazing.
not the case anymore. Unfortunately, a
Yeah.
lot of shows have shuttered. But I think just being in that space and community and knowing poets was really wonderful. I would also say though that you go to enough open mics, you start hearing the same poem over and over and over again. And I'm a judgmental person. I have an aesthetic I'm looking for.
Hmm.
There's things I want and there's things I don't want. And I think the open mic served their purpose for me at the time, but that's not something that I would be interested in frequenting as often nowadays.
Hmm.
Instead, I think it's really about trying to change the mindset around poetry. I mean, I still write, but a lot of what I'm doing is still trying to constantly just drill the nail a little bit deeper into people's heads, and it's working. I literally just had a conversation over the weekend with a poet because poets have a very averse reaction to the word business and capitalism and things like that, and I get
Yeah.
it. You know, I'm trying to let them know that no, I don't. I think I find business to be honestly the most altruistic form of art because usually people are making art for me. They're making art
Hmm.
for themselves. A business, by its nature, has to be obsessed about the other person.
Oh my gosh,
You know,
I love that. That is so true.
you have your own business. You know this.
Yeah, but that's so true because I think that really struck me because I do think sometimes people are like, "Oh, you just want to do this because of the money, blah blah blah." It's like, well, yeah, I mean, I have to make money to eat, but it's like so much more than that. Like, I'm really
Yeah,
passionate about helping people. Like, again, I think getting
yeah,
back to YouTube, like I know I help these people in some areas of the world where they don't have much. They don't have money to take a class, but yet you can go on and watch my thousands of videos and learn
yeah.
pronunciation. And I started it from a very altruistic place. Now it's my job, like
Right.
where I make money from it. But I just did it for like fun at first. Like
Yeah.
I just wanted to help people and then it kind of grew. And I think like you, now I love the business aspect of it. It's like, how can I reach more people? I think that's very creative. How can I create something that is helping someone, but yet I'm proud of and I think is fun? I think it's very, very creative
Yeah.
in a lot of ways that sometimes a job where you're working for someone else is not always super
Yeah.
super creative. um so I'm fascinated with an open mic. I don't know what that is. Like, what do you do in an open mic poetry?
Gotcha.
Do you get up? Is it like you just show up and they give you a word, or do you prepare?
But that's an interesting idea. In some ways, bringing in people who are unfamiliar with this space allows you to change the space, right?
Hmm.
Like, there's not to go on a tangent, but there's a story. It's a real story. I forget the name of it, unfortunately, but you can probably Google it. There's that. there was like this math problem that was like unsolvable, and this math teacher had put it onto a math test, and a student had missed the class and came in late for the test. And at the beginning of the test, the teacher had said, "Hey, don't do this problem because it's not actually solvable. It's kind of like a joke." The student didn't know that, and the student's really sick. So he comes in to take the test. He's like, "Is there any way, like, I forget if it was like a take-home test or something like that?" So ends up that the student has a home. He's working on it. And then like the next day, he hands it to his teacher. He's like, "Man, this thing was really hard, but here it is." And he'd solved it. He'd solved it. In
That's amazing.
a math puzzle that like no one had solved for generations, he had solved. And the only reason he solved it though is because he didn't hear the lecture at the beginning. He didn't hear the lecture that like, don't try to do this problem because it's impossible. He didn't hear that, because if he had heard it, he wouldn't have tried, right? And so it gets back to like, you would be a great person to bring into like to create a poetry event around, because you have no idea what they look like. So it's like, so you can create a whole new way, so we break out of the system. But the traditional poetry open mic is people write poems in their own time, and then the mic is the place where people can go. Like, it can be small, just a couple people, or it can be large with like hundreds of people. And usually there's a stage and a microphone, and then one at a time, a person goes up, reads their poem to the audience, and then the next person comes on. You did improv, so it might be kind of similar to, if you imagine, or even like stand up or something like that. It's very, very much in that vein. Yeah.
So interesting. So my daughter's always been interested in poetry. Do you have any
tips
for poetry with kids? I don't know where it comes from, because like I become very creative the older I've gotten, but like I'm very logical in the way that I approach things. And she just like writes these poems, and they've always been great, but like I don't know how to encourage that. So do you have any tips for me?
How old is she? If you don't mind my asking.
She's 12.
Okay. What a great. Can you find like writing camps, or find even getting a mentor or a little writing coach for her? I actually used to be that. There was a family who knew I do poetry and wanted to help out their daughter who was homeschooled. They wanted me to be like kind of like her like once a week English teacher, and we did a lot of like exercises with writing and things like that. Just having someone that is there to hear the work, see the work, praise but push. Because I think sometimes a lot of people just like, "Oh, like, you did so good," like, what? Like, yeah, I mean, that's great. We need that. But we also need, if we're serious about the thing, we also need someone that's like, "Hey, I see what you're doing here. What happens if we do this? What happens if we do?" Just kind of keep on probing it. So the writing camps obviously can do that. There are writing camps for like middle school, high school. Those certainly exist.
I think there's one at the library here. I've never
honestly, there probably is. Yeah.
That. So it's interesting that you mentioned that.
Even like reaching out to like community college professors, or even locally, like the Pittsburgh area, there's lots. So those would be directions I'd be going towards. And also reading. Not even like, you don't have to read crazy stuff, but find things that she likes reading, and even if it's just like a couple poems, like a poem a day or a poem a week, just
I love that. Who was your mentor? Do you have anyone that comes to mind? I know some people have like a person,
Yeah. So in Columbus for a long time, one of the founders of a open mic that I attended helped me out a lot. Shout out to Scott Woods. He gave me lots of opportunities. I've attended different fellowships. One of them, I got to work with Greg Pardlo, who won the Pulitzer for poetry back in 2014 or something like that. His approach to poetry is interesting because poetry is very, very analytical. You can find out a lot about a person just based on the poem that they wrote. That's why it's very vulnerable. Unintentionally, you put stuff there.
Interesting.
And so his approach to poetry is very psychoanalytical. He used to be an alcoholic, so he's applying a lot of concepts from AA to poetry. And so you would show up to workshop, and for one person's poem, we're going to be talking about for probably about 2 to 3 hours and he's asking the questions themselves are very simple, but they get very deep very fast because it's just like,
Mhm.
oh, your mom appears in your poem, but your mom, she's there in the beginning and she disappears at the end. What's your relationship with your mom like? So like it gets to like, and then it gets
Huh.
it gets very deep very fast before you
Yeah.
know it.
It's so interesting. I don't read poetry, but I'm a big reader, and I've been listening to a podcast. It is called Old School with Shiloh Brooks. Have you heard about this podcast?
I feel like I have heard. I've never listened to it, so I don't know much about
I
it.
love it. I'm kind of obsessed with it. And it's so interesting because it's just these different people, and they send in a book that changed their life. And then they talk about it, and to a person, they all say, I've read this several times throughout my life, and every time I read it, I get something so different out of it because you're reading it as a different person, and then you
Right.
see different things in the author and what the author was saying based on your perspective in life. And like these conversations get deep, but it's like that
Yeah.
same thing where like it's this one question that you have, and then you realize like as an adult, like, oh, well, maybe it's blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But as a kid, you read it as like something else. So it's so interesting. I love the podcast, so I definitely say check that out. What were you like as a kid, real quick, before we wrap up? I'm just curious. Were you always doing a million things?
uh, no, I mean I think we were busy, but not
Mm-hmm.
busy like how some parents make their kids. We
Yeah.
had things to do. We did sports. I grew up around Philadelphia, lots of like pickup basketball.
Yeah.
The neighborhood I grew up in wasn't great, but I went to private schools in the suburbs and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
there was a mix of things happening.
Mm-hmm.
I was an old man as a as a child.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Not really much of a partier. I like to read. Like
Mm-hmm.
I have a 7-year-old daughter who's just starting to read some like Goosebumps and stuff like that. I read like all the Goosebumps,
Yeah.
when I was her age, like in like a
Mm-hmm.
day. It's like my, you know, seventh grade. Like my dad's like giving me The Hobbit because he's like, you're reading the Goosebumps too fast.
Yeah,
So
I love
this should
it.
be a little slower.
Yeah. Similar in many ways.
Yeah,
Always a reader, right? Always
yeah,
very curious. I love that.
yeah.
Um,
Um, the last thing I should say, I have a twin brother, and I think when you grow up as a twin, usually there's one who's the more social one, and there's the other one who tends to be a little quieter. I'm definitely the quieter
okay.
one.
That's so
Yeah,
interesting because here you are out in the world on YouTube, all over the place, hosting live classes, doing poetry live. Like, to
I
me,
think a
that's
lot of
pretty darn social.
I don't know if it speaks to your experience, but I think a lot of people who do YouTube actually are a little bit introverted.
Yeah, well, guess it depends on who you ask. Like, I
Mm.
love to talk. So people think I'm like super extroverted. But I find when I'm doing YouTube videos, it's just me. So I don't
Mm.
feel like I'm talking to all of these people.
Mm.
It's just I'm talking to a
There's a camera. It's black
like
box. Yeah.
it's not a big deal. And I actually
Yeah.
had a class in high school that I attribute to like loving to present. It was a class just on giving presentations, and it was a whole year, and I think there were only like maybe 8 or 9 of us in the whole class. And
Wow.
I mean, once you do it over and over and over again, you just sort of learn it's not as scary. You just,
It's
you know,
not. And
get
there's a
up
lot of bad
there and
presenters.
do it. Yeah. Um, so you work really, really hard, and we know that's like the key to success, right? But who has been the most generous to you on your business journey? Who's kind of helped you get where you are today?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, my wife, anytime I just propose an idea, it's never about like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? She's like, okay, go do
Mm-hmm.
it. And then she does her own thing. She
You
has
picked a good one. Nice.
I did. She has
Yeah.
uh, she's just another person who's also figuring out ways to live on passion. So this is her first year full time living on her chess nonprofit. So she started a nonprofit for chess in the city before she was a teacher in high school, and then this is the nonprofit was there, but this is the first year she's going full time in on
Good
it.
for
So
her.
yeah,
Congrats to
exactly.
her.
Yeah,
Tell her she needs to come on. I need to
right. Yeah,
interview
for sure.
her.
I'll get you guys in touch.
I would love that. I I do want to talk to you again. I think that your message, at least the message that I'm getting from all of this, which is you can make your passion your career and your job, and you might have to have some little building blocks here and there, and one thing might have to fund the other, and it might not be perfect in this perfect line, but it sounds like you just keep doing the next right thing and just
Yeah.
taking each opportunity as they present themselves. And you're inspiring. Like, I love, everybody needs to go to all of
Thank
your
you.
YouTube channels. You have like a media empire now.
Oh my gosh, there's a
You
lot happening.
you do. It's like, I was watching your new channel. I watched a bunch of your videos, and they're
Well,
just
thank you.
so interesting. It's just conversations with people. I learned more about your journey watching some of the videos. And I mean, I could spend hours on there because you have so much content. So why don't you tell people, where can they see all of the things that you have going on in your YouTube channels and all that good stuff?
Yeah. Well, thank you again for the kind words, and thank you for checking out all the things. I
Yeah.
greatly appreciate that. This has been a wonderful conversation opportunity. So, probably the easiest ways to follow me would be through just the main sites. So, fluentamerican.com.
Mm-hmm.
All the socials are with that as well. So, like at Fluent American. And then for the poetry stuff, it's theversuspoetry.com. And then all the socials for that are at theversuspoetry. Trying to keep things simple. For those of you who want to create their own businesses, consistency across branding. So like, even if you don't use the platform, just get the names. Get the
Yes.
names so that way
Amen.
other people can get
I'm going to agree with
it.
that.
Yes. Just a real quick business tip for people.
Yeah.
Claim it real fast. But that'll keep people up to date with the socials, and if you're super curious about me, I have a couple profiles on like Instagram and Threads and even YouTube a little bit for at who is Geoff Anderson.
Oh, I haven't seen that one. Okay.
There's not as much going on there, but that's kind of more of the personal stuff that I probably should do more on if I just had more time.
Yeah, you need to write a book on your business journey. And it's inspiring because I think so many people have these passions in their lives, but it's just, how do you make that a job and a
Yeah,
career? And you're doing it.
yeah,
So
that's
I
the
love
goal.
that. I love
Yeah.
that. All right. Well, Geoff, I will be in touch because we need to do this again. I have so many more questions and we could just really keep going. So thank you so much for
Always.
being here.
Cool.
And thank you, everyone. And I'll see you all again next week. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Bye.